The United States warns its patience is running out after Pyongyang conducts another missile test. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. For months now, global tensions have been building over the Korean Peninsula as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea continues to develop ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. Since 2006, Pyongyang has conducted 5 successful nuclear tests and says a 6th test could come at any time. Bill Richardson has visited the DPRK 8 times and has extensive experience with its leadership. He's the former governor of the U.S. state of New Mexico and former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. We discussed a range of issues, including the Korean Peninsula, the Paris Climate Accord, and the U.S. Trump administration. Ambassador, welcome to The Heat. Let's start with what is going on in Washington right now. President Trump at the center of another political storm, this time accusations that he tried to block an investigation into whether his campaign colluded with Russia during the last election here in the United States. You've been in politics a long time. You've served in government at its highest levels. What do you make of it? Is this politics as usual in Washington, or is it, as a U.S. senator, a senator from the president's own party put it, this is a downward spiral at the White House?
It's a downward spiral. It's very serious. I've never seen Washington so convoluted, so up in arms over this. And I'm old enough to remember Watergate. I mean, I was very young then. But it's incredible, the division. And I think this president is committing very, very strong political and national security mistakes. And this is not the end of it. There could be some serious hearings involving his potential removal from office. Now, we will see. We will see what happens. He's lucky that he has Republicans in the control of the House and Senate. But I was in Capitol Hill yesterday, and there's a lot of nervousness among Senate Republicans. And if he loses that base, he's going to be in trouble.
How much trouble is the president in a political sense?
He's in deep trouble because he's under 40%. It's about 36% approval rating. No president has been so low so early in their term. They usually have a honeymoon. But I think because of this Russia investigation, because of the potential obstruction of justice, potential, I'm not making an accusation of General Flynn's investigation, because of the potential leaking of classified material to the Russians. There's a lot of nervousness and a lot of issues out there that make the president vulnerable. I want him to succeed. I'm a Democrat, but I want my president to succeed, but he makes it very difficult to support what he's doing.
There are many questions about President Trump, questions that are being asked, not just here in the United States, but around the world. One of the questions is, how did a man like Donald Trump, a businessman, a populist, as he's been sometimes called, a man with no experience in public office or political office, become president of the United States? What does it tell us? Explain to us, what is the political atmosphere in the country right now?
Well, the political atmosphere in America is the same as in many other countries in the world. There's an effort against the establishment. There's a very populist sentiment in Europe, in the United States, anti-establishment. People are not making enough money. Wages are too low. And an effort that Donald Trump launched against immigration, against immigrants, has happened in other countries too, against refugees, Syrian refugees in Europe. Although the election in France was a very welcome movement in which Macron, the establishment candidate, won. But nonetheless, it's a nativism, a populism that surged in America among the white voter, not the minority voter, the white voter in America in industrial states like Ohio and Michigan, Pennsylvania, that Donald Trump unexpectedly won, that were Democratic states. I think his election was fair. He did win. There was Russian interference, but I think he would have won anyway, not by much. He lost the popular vote, but won the electoral vote. So, you know, the public wanted something new, somebody not from Washington, somebody that not was a politician. And that happens around the world. It's not just America.
Let's move on to foreign policy right now, the president's foreign policy, specifically something that you are familiar with, foreign policy over the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and its missile and nuclear program. The previous administration under President Obama adopted a policy known as strategic patience. That was the way of dealing with this program. It hasn't worked.
No, strategic patience hasn't worked. In fact, our policy towards North Korea needs to be changed, I believe. I think we need diplomacy, and I think China is the key. China has leverage over North Korea, but China has not wanted to use it. China likes the problems the U.S. has in that region. But maybe China's changing because Kim Jong-un has been too disruptive. He's shooting missiles, he's shooting nuclear weapons, he's destabilizing the region, he's not listening to China that helps him. So I think China is the key. I think we need a new policy of engagement with North Korea, but on very tough terms. I'm very nervous about this talk about preemptive military strikes. I've been to North Korea 8 times. I think you can make a deal with them, a tough deal, and then you have to enforce it. But I do think China is the key, and China's helping a little bit more than it did before, which wasn't much, but they're helping a little more, and I think that it's in their interest to do it.
But China is saying that it's already doing a lot. It's imposed sanctions against the DPRK. It's proposed the so-called dual suspension plan in which the Koreans and North Koreans, the DPRK, will stop its missile tests, and in return, the United States and South Korea will cease its joint exercises, military exercises.
Well, that's not a good deal for the U.S. or South Korea. I think that anti-missile system has to be established because otherwise we're vulnerable. North Korea is already shooting missiles that could reach Guam. Their technology is advancing. But I think China is key in getting more sanctions on North Korean currency through Chinese banks, on cyber. There are a lot of North Koreans in China initiating cyber attacks. China is key in terms of exports of oil and imports of energy to North Korea. That's where China can exercise more leverage. I do agree that they've helped more. I do agree. And then there's the other component. Is North Korea listening? I'm not sure. This new leader there is very unpredictable. You don't know what he wants to do. But China has become key, and they have acted more positively. There's no question about that. The question is, they can do more, and I hope they do more.
As you point out, there's been some belligerent talk coming out of the United States, talk of all options being on the table, etc. There is something that China cannot do. China cannot assure the DPRK that the United States will not attack it.
That's right. Look, I'm not saying China is the total key, but it's an important component. And look, the region is very vulnerable. You have 25 million South Koreans right on the DMZ with North Korea that are vulnerable. You have 50,000 American troops in South Korea, 70,000 in Japan. And I think it's in China's interest and the U.S. interest for there just to be stability in the region. China is a major geopolitical force. Geopolitical giants should not want instability. And there is instability now. There's worrisome trends in Japan, in South Korea. The new president of South Korea may want to engage in dialogue. I think that he should be supported in doing that.
He said so. He said he's prepared to go to Pyongyang to meet with Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's also saying that he thinks a war is inevitable. So I worry about that. And he's been provoked by North Korea with this missile launching last Sunday. So a lot of these pro-dialogue presidents that are elected in South Korea, sometimes North Korea says, well, we don't want to have a dialogue. Hopefully, it'll get better. But right now, I'm very worried about the region. And I just don't think preemptive military strikes, more military maneuvers is the answer. I think it has to be diplomacy. And I know diplomacy with the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, was up and down. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But, you know, here's a country, North Korea, that has 20 nuclear weapons. They have missiles that could reach America. They can reach Japan, South Korea. They've got over 1 million men in arms. They've got a lot of conventional weapons. I think it's important there be diplomacy, dialogue, a deal in exchange for North Korea finding a way to trim its missile and military and nuclear activity. They will get food. The people are starving there. Energy assistance, sanctions relief, end of the armistice war. And I think that's where China, that has enormous economic leverage over North Korea, can be a very important player.
But how difficult will it be to negotiate with the DPRK? You've been there, as you pointed out, 8 times. How difficult is it to negotiate with them? You've been there, you've negotiated the release of Americans being held there. What is your experience?
It's very difficult to negotiate with North Korea because they don't think like Americans. They don't think like Chinese. They think they're right. It's a cult of personality. They don't normally act like a quid pro quo. Okay, you do this, we do that. They think their position is perfect, infallible, so their concession sometimes is, we'll wait till you reach our point of view. It's not easy. But I think in the end, what they always do, the North Koreans, the father of Kim Jong-un, they raise the stakes, a lot of bluster, a lot of missile tests, but then they're ready for a deal. And my hope is that this will be the case. But I don't have the answer. I don't know what the ultimate goal of Kim Jong-un is. I don't know that.
Talking about that ultimate goal, as you point out, there will be economic benefits for the DPRK in some kind of a deal with the United States, with South Korea. But ultimately, do you think the DPRK wants some kind of peace treaty with the South, a non-aggression pact with the United States?
Yeah, I think they want the end to the state of war. They've always hinted at that. An end to military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea, the THAAD missile. But they won't necessarily get all that, but there's a potential negotiation. And in the end, I believe they want to continue their nuclear program. But maybe the concession or the issue that we should explore is a moratorium on testing, nuclear missile testing, and then a prolonged negotiation that leads to some kind of stability in the peninsula. That should be the ultimate goal. They're not all of a sudden going to become a democracy. So you have to be realistic. But the current state is in very bad shape. A lot of tension, people worried about war. You in China, you don't want refugees from North Korea coming into China. So the best answer, I believe, is diplomacy. And I don't see that.
Let's move back to domestic policies. Let's talk about immigration. It's widely acknowledged in the United States, I think across the political spectrum, that this country's immigration policies are in need of a major overhaul. President Trump is proposing building a wall. Now, you are governor of a border state. What do you make of that?
It's a terrible idea. It's not going to work. It's much too expensive. Some estimate $20 billion. It sends a terrible signal to our neighbor, Mexico. Illegal immigration is coming from Central America, and it's done through tunnels, containers, not people walking across. And President Trump has said Mexico's going to pay for the wall. Mexico's already rejected that. I believe in countries that build bridges, not walls. I believe in refugees, and immigration enhances America, makes it stronger, budget-wise, more products, more taxes. Immigrants do a lot of jobs Americans don't do. They're part of American society. And I just think it's a wrong policy, along with the ban on Muslims, the 7 countries that the president wants to hold back coming in from the United States. We need the support of those Muslim communities in America to detect the terrorists, not to make them feel that they're not welcome. So I'm very unhappy with our immigration policies. Our immigration policy should do 2 things. 1, we should secure our borders. We shouldn't permit illegal activity, people coming in illegally. And that's more border patrol agents, more technology, but not a wall. And secondly, we need to say to the 11 million that are already here, you can stay if you abide by the law, if you learn English, if you get the criminals out, those that have criminal records. But the men and women, the families are here, the young people, let them stay. That's America. But the Republican Party and President Trump don't want to do that. So it's a real political problem.
One final question, that is the issue of climate change. The United States under President Trump is now threatening to pull out of that Paris Accord on climate change. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the United States pulling out of climate change is a very bad idea. 194 countries signed it. Science says that sea levels and the planet is suffering. It's all in our interest to reduce pollution, but also create jobs. And then the United States and China, the 2 biggest polluters in the world, agreed on a landmark deal to cut emissions. What is China going to do if its main partner pulls out? China may have to decide it's going to pull out too. Makes no sense diplomatically.
Or take the lead.
Yeah. So my hope is that the president is going on a trip. He will see the importance, especially the Europeans and the Asians and the Chinese, that the United States should stay. Maybe it should be modified a bit to please his constituency, but not for the U.S. to pull out. That would be a diplomatic and environmental disaster, in my opinion.
That was Ambassador Bill Richardson.